Hello, folks. It's Dr. Christine Sauer with the Sparkles for Better Mental Health. It's all about personal growth. And today I'm all excited to have Josh Kelley on. He is a pastor, a bartender, a writer, and a very sparkly, interesting person. So welcome, Josh.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Christine.
So I always ask my guests, how the heck did you get from doing what you learned to do to doing what you're doing now? What's your story?
Oh man, I'll try to give the short version, but I was a pastor for about 14 years all told, and just I did fairly okay at it, but there's nothing. It just I never quite felt at home. I'm just basically what I come to realize later is I'm more of a specialist. I'm really good at communicating, not so good at just about everything else. And especially a small church, you need to have a general practitioner more than a specialist, right? And so, I could preach pretty good, I could write pretty good, but like when it came to say like my idea of counseling was, stop being stupid, and
That's a
and
good word.
yeah, and the administrative stuff and all that. So, and then we just had challenges. I mean, being a pastor, it can be brutal. It really can be very tough, and had various things happen. And but then end up writing a book at that time. And then, especially if you, as a writer, you think the big thing is if I can just get traditionally published, that's going to solve everything. And I was actually very fortunate. I wrote this book, and I got a traditional publisher, and I thought everything was going to change, and I was going to be able to become a full-time writer, and just didn't happen that way. So we right around that time we had to sell our church. We had to close our church because it just shrunk down, and then so we sold our house, packed our daughters up into our minivan, and drove around the country for 8 months.
Wow.
Saw 40 states, 2 provinces, and Tijuana. So been all over quite a bit. Came back from that, realized I didn't want to be a pastor anymore. I just knew, there's a lot of jobs you can do just to make money. Being a pastor isn't one of them. Being a counselor, right? You don't want a counselor who's just there trying to earn a living. And so I decided to become a bartender. And I actually really enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun. Got to hang out with people and make fun drinks and all sorts of stuff like that. And then COVID happened. And during that time, though, the idea was I was going to keep on writing. I wrote a novel during the 5 years I was bartending. And then COVID came, shut everything down, of course. And all of a sudden I find myself without a job. And that was a massive, that day, that first day out of work, that first week was just brutal. I mean, I didn't realize how much my identity and my value came from working. And now when I had no job, nothing that I could do, it just wrecked me. But so that's a whole different story how I kind of grew into that. But then I had an opportunity to do some ghostwrite an article for someone, and I'd never done that, wasn't on my radar. And I turned out to be really good, because when you write a novel, it's this whole thing where you're trying to mimic the voice of another, of all these voices you have in your head, right? All these characters. And so ghostwriting is basically doing the same thing, mimicking someone's voice, except it's a real person. And so I did that. And then from there, I just had this opportunity to write lots of books. I've ghostwritten about a dozen books, and it's been a great experience. I feel I'm, for the first time in my life, I'm finally in the right ballpark. Maybe still trying to find my exact right position on the field, but I'm finally kind of doing about what I should be doing. A little late.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now tell me, what's your favorite thing to ghostwrite?
I really enjoy memoirs. I don't do them as much simply because they're a little hard. They're a little harder. They don't. Okay, how do you say this? Whereas like a business book. So what I do a lot of, especially, is I like people who are coaches or business leaders. They have some program, something that they're doing. I'm able to take that information and turn it into a book. Take a program, turn it into a book, and that's something that people can make some money on. Memoirs are a lot harder because that's a very tough market. So a lot of times, if someone's going to write a memoir and they're going to hire a ghostwriter, it's going to be because they want to have it written rather than they're hoping to make money on it. But memoirs are a lot of fun because I love storytelling. And especially with memoirs, you're not trying to just tell your whole life story. You're trying to kind of pick out a theme and just follow it through. And it's kind of like crafting a narrative arc in a novel. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. I've never written a novel, so That sounds like an undertaking, really, to have all those different characters in the head and not confuse them all.
Yeah, it's bizarre to the extent to which these voices in your head become people. It's I had one occasion where I was writing, I was working on a character, and she's, the fundamentalist Christian who, got a big heart but can be a little judgmental, and I'm sipping some Irish whiskey as I'm doing it, and I start feeling guilty for drinking my Irish whiskey because I know she would disapprove. It's like, what?
Really?
It's just bizarre. I'm not sure that's healthy, but it sure is fun.
That sounds like a lot of fun. So what was your all-time favorite cocktail?
It's kind of like asking what my favorite book is. It's like, oh, there's so many good ones. I tend to like cocktails that are a little more complex. Like one of my favorites is one called The Last Word. That's green chartreuse, gin, lime juice, and maraschino liqueur. And they're all very big flavors. And to bring them all together like that shouldn't work, but it does. So that's kind of one of my favorites.
Wow, sounds interesting. I never was big in cocktails. I like the sweeter ones, but
Yeah.
I never understood how somebody could stomach a margarita with that salt on top. Ooh.
Yeah. I do mine without salt. I agree. Yeah, I prefer mine without salt, but most people like salt, so hey, whatever.
So did you have to study to become a bartender to know all those different cocktails, or is it just a training on the job?
A lot of it's training on the job, but because I love to learn, I kind of I did a lot of studying on my own, especially the history of cocktails. And there's so much folklore, there's so many stories. There's the history of the cocktails, arguably the only genuinely American culinary invention. It's back in the day, like, how we might in the US say, like, oh wait, there's this new fresh French restaurant, or this new French cook is at this restaurant, we need to go check the place out. Back in the day, they would say, oh, there's an American bartender just came into the bar down in London, we need to go check it out. And just all these stories of things that happened. And also like about the prohibition, that actually contrary to popular opinion, the prohibition actually kind of worked. It actually lowered drinking in the United States. There's just stories. There's so many stories, so many fascinating stuff. And so that to say, because I enjoy learning, I enjoy that side. I enjoy creating. I'm a decent cook. I don't really use cookbooks. I just kind of figure things out. So same thing with craft design cocktails. So yeah.
So you cook too. You love to cook, and you love to cook together some storybooks.
Yeah. My wife is the baker. She does good because baking requires more exact science.
Yeah.
And cooking, you can kind of look at a recipe and say, okay, that's a good idea. Now let's go do whatever I want.
Yeah, with baking, you sometimes run in problems when you try to do that.
Yep.
I did
Yep.
it.
You
It
got to know
didn't
the
work
science.
well.
Yeah.
That is true. So tell me, when you're writing, how much writing do you usually do daily?
It's going to depend a lot on the project because some stuff is easier than others, but I shoot for between 1,000 and 2,000 words a day. And that's what I call serviceable words, like where it's actually I've gone through it once or twice and like I like it. It's not like, ready to send off or anything, but it's in good shape. And so it's kind of been the process of learning to write fast, especially ghostwriting, because it's you have to do a lot of projects and kind of get a little faster. But it's kind of like one of the things I'm kind of learning how to harness my ADHD and work with that, because find my own cycles and my rhythms and what doesn't work. A lot of my life has been trying to figure out how to work in my own weird head. I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until I was early 40s, I think.
Okay.
And so I just spent all that time kind of figuring things out on my own, thinking that this is what everyone did. And so it's still kind of this process of figuring out how I work, what I do, what works for me.
Tell me how does ADHD influence your work? How did you discover that you were different than others, and what are you doing to adjust to that?
Yeah. So there's just I always thought that how I was just a little quirky, but more or less I didn't realize how odd it was. And I joked about, like, oh yeah, maybe I have ADHD, and everyone kind of jokes about that. And then I had my leadership team when I was they one time told me, when you're talking with people after church down in the basement of the church, you are trying so hard to listen to them. It looks fake. We know you're not being fake, but that's how it looks. And the reality was, it's a lower ceiling, very noisy, and it was almost painful for me to pay attention just to that conversation. And I really did have to work very hard at it. And so at that point, I was finally like, you know what, I'm going to stop joking about it. I'm just going to find out. And so I went to my doctor, and unfortunately, I have a really good relationship with our family doctor, and he didn't like go through all these tests. He said, yeah, let's give it a shot. He said, kind of the way that we're going to figure it out is if the Ritalin works, then you have ADHD. If it sends you higher, then you're not. And again, it's because we had a good working relationship. He wasn't worried about me abusing the stuff. And I'll never forget the first time that I took it, just how bizarre it was that I didn't have to pay attention to everything I was driving past. I could be in a room. We that day went into like a video conference thing, and realizing about an hour into the meeting that I didn't know what the whole room looked like, because normally I'd look all that up. I'd look at everything. I'd feel everything. And that's part of the advantage with the ADHD is I do notice more than most people. As a bartender, that's useful. I can see things. I can pick up clues. I can understand, oh wait, this person's probably a real estate agent because they have a lockbox in the back of their car. Just lots of little things. So I notice a lot, and there's an extent to where I can function without medicine if I kind of find the rhythms, and I kind of know how to, if I start work at a certain time and do things, I can kind of do okay. It became a bigger issue for my marriage, to be honest. And kind of discovering through some counseling that ADHD actually has a much higher divorce rate, because I can't give my wife the attention that she wants, that she really deserves. And so that I kind of actually went off Ritalin for a while, and then kind of after talking to counselor, went on Adderall, which is an extended release thing. And just so that there's a better shot. So I'm getting better at trying to pay attention to her. She's getting better at accepting that I'm not mean, or not mean, but that, this stuff I do probably isn't going to go away. So it's kind of all these things, trying to work with all these pieces and figure out how to do my best and take advantage of who I am. And at the same time, realizing that a lot of shame has come with ADHD that I simply didn't realize. I didn't realize how much that affected me, because I thought I'm pretty confident all in all. I have a pretty decent ego, but then I had to kind of deal with the fact that, oh wait, maybe it's not as shame is a bigger issue than I thought.
Oh, really? Is it? Yeah. Really, ADHD can be an advantage too, because people with ADHD can switch faster, they're more creative, and usually have a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And that's why most people that entrepreneurs, 80% of them have some kind of ADHD. It's kind of a requirement of the job.
It can be. And it's fun to even watch TV. You watch whether it's Gordon Ramsay or Ty Pennington back with the home makeover, whatever. It's like, I'm watching these guys like, oh yeah, that's ADHD. It's not just like they're hyper, but it's like you just see where their tensions are every which way. It's like, yeah, I recognize that. And then I go look the person up and, oh yeah, that's the thing. But a lot of times it can be a struggle, and you have to kind of recognize that it's like always this balance with so many things. Like, there's the side that says, oh, let's accept everything and just celebrate diversity. Well, neurodiversity, that's true. But at the same other time, it does cause genuine problems. It really does. And I have to try and work with that. And then in addition to that, when it was during the pandemic, so I know my oldest daughter has ADHD. She got that from me. It's hereditary. Then my youngest daughter came to me and said, hey, Dad, I think I'm dyslexic. Like, oh, okay. So I researched that a little bit, and I'm like, dang it, I'm dyslexic. I mean, it's not severe, but when you talk about the advantages, it's like, it's not so much that it's a disability, but just a different way of processing information that has a lot of advantages. But also, like when I write, it has disadvantages. I drop out whole words all the time. When I write, my handwriting is atrocious. My spelling is atrocious. But again, I drop out full words, gone. And I have to, now that I realize what's going on, I'm able to kind of take the steps to kind of make up for that. And that's what I'm trying to encourage my daughter to do, is like, how can you take advantage of the fact that, like, she goes to some place, if she goes to a house, she goes to another city, she remembers it instantly. She just maps things in her head. So that's great. But now how do we deal with the fact that reading is a struggle?
I get it. That is an interesting discussion. Really, it is. Now, a question I have is, I'm on the teaching team of Dr. Daniel Amen, and he did a lot of work about ADHD, and he calls it actually selective attention disorder, because he said people with ADHD usually can pay fine attention to things that are exciting or new, but they have trouble getting ordinary things done, like tidying up,
Mm-hmm.
or stuff that even normal people in normal is relative, find boring.
Mm-hmm.
Do you notice that too?
Gosh, yeah. There's a couple different things. One is, it's that basically, and we're still trying to figure out what ADHD is, but it seems to be basically there's, I think it's dopamine, but one of the neurotransmitters where there's just a deficiency in that. And so because of that, you're craving to get more of the dopamine, and your attention naturally goes to the thing that gives you that. That can be playing a video game. It can be watching TV. So when I walk into the room to tell my daughters, hey, please empty the dishwasher or whatnot, I have to have them turn off the TV. I don't care if it's commercials. When they were little girls, it could have been Teletubbies or it could have been Dora the Explorer, and I'm just zoned in watching it because it's providing more dopamine than having a conversation about the dishwasher. And so there's a part of that where you can't control, and you can use it because you get into this hyper focus mode where something's giving you that dopamine, and if I'm reading a book and all that, you're gone to the world. But you're having to find ways to, how do you get those things done that you have to get done? So that's part of it. The other thing is that it can be information overload because you're always seeing everything and you have a hard time selectively seeing. A laundry basket full of clean clothes can send me into a panic. I mean, literally, my chest will tighten. Like, okay, wait, you need to put this away. Socks. All you're going to see now is socks. Ignore everything else. All that exists in your world right now are socks. And to this day, it's getting better out of habit, but I have to talk myself through, and sometimes I'll kind of regress a little bit. I'm like, I have to talk myself through the socks, then the underwear. Then, okay, you only have to hang up 3 shirts, Josh. It's not that big of a deal. And it feels like this is too much. This is too much. So it can be a real challenge. Yeah. Did I answer your question? I know it kind of went all over the place.
No. That is actually very interesting because ADHD is still a lot of a mystery, and Dr. Amen distinguishes actually 7 types of ADHD. I find that very interesting, and they all have a little drop in the prefrontal cortex that you can find in the brain images.
Right. Yeah.
And that is really interesting. And so I'm always interested to see how people that struggle with those disorders experience it, because everybody's different, even if they have a common label, because ADHD is really a label. I don't consider it a real, well, what is the diagnosis anyway, but to put people in drawers.
Yeah.
And there's stuff that makes life easier sometimes, and but on the other hand, I think it's important to respect every person in their individuality and uniqueness.
Yeah, I mean, you think, let's say, like, take something like blindness or a really bad eyesight. A label could be something we just shove them into a corner. They're now blind, and woe is them. That's not helpful for anyone. Neither is it helpful to say, hey, being blind is awesome. Let's all, we should celebrate being blind. So just go out there and be blessed. No, it's like, okay, we're going to teach you how to read Braille. We're going to teach you how to use this. Let's teach you the tools. Let's also find, are there ways, what hearing increases? What are the things that the benefits that you've gained? Because there are things that a blind person is going to have certain benefits.
Sure.
That normal seeing people can't. So just human nature is you tend to go to one side or the other, either marginalize them, ignore them, try to cast demons out of them or whatever, or try to make it to lionize it and not actually help. It's like, no, ADHD is a challenge. And I have low sympathy for when you have the websites that just make it sound amazing. Like, yeah, no, there are benefits, absolutely. But for my wife, it's really tough. And so I'm going to do what I can to supplement. I'm going to find I'm going to learn how to quote unquote read Braille. I'm going to learn the tools that will help me. So for me, that includes Adderall. But I'm also going to make the use of the things that gives me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. And so when you write books,
Mm-hmm.
how do you find books to ghostwrite? Do people approach you, or how can they find you if somebody says, I have a book in me, but I really don't have the time, or I don't know how to put stories on paper, or I can't put the characters to life.
Yeah.
Can you help me?
Yeah. And ghostwriting is fine because you usually don't get your name on books, and you can't. I have a couple of my clients I can tell you about, but most of them I can't. So it's a lot of it's word of mouth, and I have a website. I work on Readsy. I have a good LinkedIn profile. All these things, and then also I reach out to people, like finding someone like I see they have a really good program. There, this guy had this looks like a great program for pornography addiction. And so it's like, I'll reach out and say, hey, have you ever thought of turning that into a book? My website is the main thing. So it's joshkelley.inc. So INK, it's this great ending. Yeah,
That's
INK.
a good ending. Like
Yeah,
it.
it's great. So having that website, I send people there a lot. And the way I work with each client is going to be so different. Sometimes I am writing full books, we're having lots of conversations. I had one book that I did the memoir. One guy wrote a memoir for. He flew me down to a city. We hung out and just talked for like 10, 11, 12 hours straight. And I recorded a lot of audio and then went back and wrote his thing. Some people, another person is writing a book about divorce and how to divorce better, as opposed to, basically her whole thing is, how can you like who you are after the whole thing's over? And I think it's a great concept. For her, she wants to write her book. She wants to write, and she's a good writer. So instead, I'm coaching her through that. And that's it's kind of all sorts of different things. Yeah.
So you also help authors through the book writing process, which can be quite tedious, and often people give up in the middle.
Yeah. And so for a lot of people, when they think of writing a book, to them it feels like saying go jump to the moon. It just seems impossible, right? It's just this incredibly daunting task. To me, a book is like a marathon. It's a lot of work. It is absolutely a lot of work. But you do this, then you do this, then you do this, then you do this, and you just keep on going, and it gets done. And I've done it enough. I can just push through that dauntingness, because again, I know the process. If I keep on writing, the thing will be done. I know that the first time I write anything, it's going to feel like it's absolutely awful. In the writing world, we have a phrase. Well, I won't use the proper phrase, but we call the crummy first draft. Anne Lamott has a more colorful way of saying it. But it's just realizing that the first time you write anything, it's going to look like absolute crap. That's just the way it is. And if you can't be okay with that, you're never going to write anything good, because you can't write good until you write bad. And that's just the way it is. And so
I like it. You can't write good until you write bad. I always tell my people, if something is worthwhile doing, it's worth doing badly.
yes. Oh, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Nobody gets born doing something perfectly. It's impossible.
Yeah. And it's certainly how social media can kind of hurt us a little way in a lot of ways, but that, we only tend to see the good part. We don't tend to see as much the struggle of all the bad copies, or all the times that you tried to lose weight, but it just didn't work, or whatever the thing is that you have to do badly first to figure out. We don't tend to talk about that as much. And because, you have to do that.
Sure.
You have to kind of figure it out as you go. Yeah.
I mean, nobody is born perfect, and some people expect it from themselves, and then they never get started with anything. So I love that you do that.
Yeah.
But did you ever have a writer's block where you have a piece of paper in front of you and you say, oops, what do I write?
All the time. It's just that simple. That it's there's where is it? Somewhere up around my wall, I have a quote that says, where is it? Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work.
Ah, that's a good one.
And so this is from Chuck Close, I think is his name, not someone I know of, but it's just a great quote, because you basically an idea with so many creative processes, and I'm not just talking writing, I'm talking music, whatever it is that you think you're supposed to wait for the muse to show up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She's never going to. You'll have bits.
No, I always wait for the muse to show up. Coincidentally, it shows up every morning at 9 o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's yeah, if you keep on showing up and working, like say 9 o'clock, then your brain gets into the habit of, okay, at 9 o'clock, I'm going to start to work and that stuff is going to start to flow. Um, and especially one of the tricks that helps is having routines, having a certain time, having maybe even a certain list and a certain set of music that you listen to. So there is a song by this old, Christian alternative band called the 77s that when I hear the intro to that song, I'm ready to write it from my novel, even though the novel's done. It just immediately takes me to that spot because, after doing that, for years, it just has that association. And it's good to have things like that kind of get you in that, there's all these tools you can do to get yourself ready for inspiration, but you have to just show up day after day. And so when it comes to writer's block, yeah, you're gonna have writer's block. Just keep writing, write crap, because it's easier to edit crap than it is to edit a blank page.
I like that. That is a really good statement. It's easier to edit crap than to edit a white page. There's nothing
Yep.
to edit on a white page. There's nothing
Yep.
there. Yeah, I love that. And so many artists in the end fail because they wait for that inspiration
Yeah.
and it never comes. Or they
Yeah.
start something and said, oh, no, I don't feel like it. Yeah, well.
Oh yeah. The number of days I don't feel like writing are legion. It's just, and there's so many distractions, so many things are easier to do. And to succeed in anything takes a lot of work. Let's take, like, we look at the music industry. My family and I used to watch the show The Voice, really enjoyed it. And people can have this feeling like whoever, all the, Christina Aguilera, or who all the coaches are, that they were lucky. They have a good voice, they did work, but they're lucky. But when you see more behind the scenes, they worked really, really, really hard. I mean, the sacrifices they made to get where they're at are insane. And if you're wanting to be successful in anything, that thing has to be more important to you than a bunch of other things. When I wrote my first book, I remember the point at which I had to delete Candy Crush off my phone, because I would write in the evening after, at the time I was a bivocational pastor. So I would write sermons in the morning, go to Starbucks and serve coffee in the afternoon, come home, put my little girls to bed, and then sit at the counter and write. And at that point, I'm tired. I mean, I'm really tired. And just like one game of Candy Crush to just kind of calm myself down seemed like a good idea, but then on, and especially with ADHD, because that minor hit of each game was so much more appealing than what I really wanted. But I could be the world champion at Candy Crush, and I don't, so what? But I wanted to write a book. That's what really mattered to me.
I really like that attitude, because that is the difference between an amateur and a professional. The professional just keeps doing it, even though they might not feel like it sometimes. And eventually, it's like the French say, l'appétit vient en mangeant. That means when you're eating, you get the appetite. So when you're writing, sometimes you get the fun in it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The more you do it, and it becomes addictive. The more you do it, it can become fun, but you have to go through a lot of troughs to get there.
I'm sure. And some people say writing is really a very lonely job. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it can be, especially so, and I'm an extrovert, which is kind of unusual among writers. Most writers are more introverts, but it is mostly a solo thing. Now, we have those writers associations. So like this May I was a faculty at the Northwest Christian Writers Association at their conference. Conferences are great to kind of remind each other. Online communities. I'm part of the Association of Ghostwriters, and so that's a great little thing. We get together every now and again, and like we had office hours last week, and it just, man, it's so encouraging, so helpful. So you have to kind of really make a point and then study. You have to read other stuff. You have to really try to keep yourself plugged in, because otherwise it can be very lonely. Absolutely.
So I really love that. So to wrap this up, the listeners of the show, what would you tell them that they should do when they feel, oh, well, I would like to write a book?
Yeah. I would say, you have to, number one thing, and this is when I have clients, my number one question is why? What is your purpose? You have to know that. You have to have some burning thing that makes it worthwhile. And I think of like when I wrote my first book, a good friend of mine was also writing a book, and he was writing like a little Bible study type thing. And I said, hey, if you ever need any help, I've studied this a lot, let me know. And he just laughed. He said, Josh, I've seen how hard you work on this. I've seen the time you put in. I don't want my book to be that good. My goal is to have something that my church can use and maybe some other churches in my network. That's it. Perfect. He knew his goal, and he knew how much effort it'd take to get there, right? My goal was to write a traditionally published book and because of my goal, I had to put in a different level of effort. So know what it is you're trying to do. If your goal is to write for the sake of untangling your thoughts, processing your history, things like that, that's awesome. That's well worthwhile, and put that effort into it. But if your goal is to write something that's going to be published, you've just taken the effort level times 10 minimum. And just know that and be okay with that. So that's the number one thing. Know why you're doing it and have that objective ahead of you when you get discouraged. And from there is the importance of reading, doing a lot of reading yourself. That's, you have to read. If writers have to read, there's no two ways about it. There's people argue about that, like, well, I want to write, but I'm not good at reading. I don't care. You have to read. It's that simple. You have to be able to take critiques. You have to find people who can help you. That's where coaches come in. So there's plenty of good stuff out there. I would say, in terms of a good book to start, if someone just wants something to read, I would really encourage Stephen King's book on writing. I'm not much of a Stephen King fan, to be awesome. I mean, to be honest, I'm not into horror, but on writing, there's a guy who knows his stuff. He knows how to write. And so his book on writing is just a great book. It's a great place to start. They'll give you a good, honest sense of like what it takes.
Oh, that's a really nice recommendation. So your website again is joshkelley.inc.
Yeah, so JOSHKELLEY and .inc, INK, like the stuff you write with. And I'm especially, as a ghostwriter, honestly, a lot of people don't appreciate that ghostwriting. When someone hires me as a ghostwriter, they're basically paying my full-time salary for 2 to 4 to 5 months. So it's not cheap. Honestly, very few people can afford my services because, again, this is what I do for a living. But being able to coach people and stuff like that is a lot of times a much more affordable way to get started, and to have someone who I write at a professional level. The books I've written have been published. Not all of them. Some people choose to self-publish, but if that's what you're wanting to do, I'm certainly glad to help people out along that way.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Josh, for being on the show today. Absolutely. And I'm sure the listeners took a few nuggets out of there if they want to publish a book or have it written, or just create some kind of writing that helps them sparkle and makes them sparkle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Josh.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
And this is the end of this episode of Sparkles for Mental Health. Stay tuned for the next episode. Bye-bye.